Well, it started about 12, 13 years ago when I was in New York and I was watching television all the time, and all the news from Ireland was like shootings and bombings. And this young kid came on, and he was a boxer named Barry McGuigan, and he said, like, leave the fighting to McGuigan was his catchphrase. So I thought it was kind of innocent and, you know, naive a little bit, but great. Here was a guy in a violent profession saying, stop fighting. That contradiction interested me, and then basically when the Canary Wharf bombing went off, I thought, you know, oh man, we're going back to this, you know. So in essence then I wanted to make a story about that and my kind of attitude to bombing basically and to boxing. I used a love story to cement the two of them together. A story in which the women are seen to suffer in the war.
My daughter, with her brave son Liam, keeps the house together until her husband Thomas returns.
I went to Belfast. I met prisoners' wives, and they were very, very frank and open with me and told me, you know, really their life story, and that was amazing to, you know, you go somewhere like that and you've read about it and you've read about it in the papers and you know all the politics and all that, but the human tragedy of it just hits you in the face, you know. And a prisoner's wife, she's not chosen to be a prisoner's wife. It's because of something he did. He's in prison. And she's just there, she's stuck there. And she's a political symbol. And there's nothing she can do about it.
Danny Flynn's out.
Danny comes out of jail and he's going home. This place is his home. He decides to stay there. He's not conscious of the fact he's staying there for Maggie. At that stage, as he says to Ike at one point in the cafe, he says he wants to set the record straight.
How old are you?
32. Archie Moore fought for the world title at 42.
Cha-cha.
Setting the record straight for him at that moment means having a few fights, just trying to regain some of the pride and dignity that he's lost over the years. Then the bomb goes off, and I think he feels absolutely bound to remain in that place.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
It's my home. I think I wanted to make a film about kind of growing up. And I had this in the back of my mind that the boxer fought within the rules, you know, and that he wasn't a terrorist, you know what I mean? So that it was like, by terrorist, I mean somebody who fights without rules. In other words, who dehumanizes the opposition to the point where any means necessary will work. And I thought that the boxer was somebody who didn't do that, who kind of stood up for himself in a way, honestly, in the ring. And that was the story I wanted to do.
He had a fairly clear idea, or the seed of an idea, of what Danny might be. I did also, and I suppose we met somewhere in the middle. And he underwent various different incarnations during the course of the work. But essentially, he remained a man who'd pretty much lost the ability to speak. And that was something that struck us both as interesting.
It was kind of like a huge silence at the center, wasn't there, of your character?
At the beginning of the story, when you find the two of them, and I'm setting up the gym and just trying to get back into it, it's an entire world and it's a secure world, and who knows, the ring may have something comforting in the way that a prison cell has something perversely comforting to someone that's been in there a long time. You know, it's something known, and the borderlines are very close to each other, and the definitions are clear, and all that kind of stuff. So the boxing world, in its purity, I suppose, must seem comforting to me after all that time, coming back into a society that I'd left 14 years ago, which I'd found deeply confusing as an adolescent, and which is going to seem even more confusing and threatening, I think, coming out. And I think that silence is part of the whole thing as well. It's, you know, I'm involved in an activity that doesn't require words.
I haven't seen you in 14 years.
And now you're right next door to me every day. And when I do see you, all I get from you is the odd grunt. Do you not think that's strange?
We wear masks to be accepted, or sometimes we don't want to be accepted and keep people distant, so we wear a mask. So often the process is not finding out what's the motivation of the character, which is kind of a driven mentality and a kind of too pragmatic a mentality. It's unmasking the masks that the people wear to find out what's the essence.
At the beginning, we didn't speak to each other at all because we've not, in the film, we've not met for 14 years. We decided, you know, we'd just avoid each other. So like we'd be on here kind of tiptoeing around, trying not to bump into each other. But, you know, as the stories developed, I got to know him a bit better, and he's very intense.
Okay, darling, let's go.
He sparred in total about 300 rounds, 350 rounds. He got his nose busted, he got his eyes blackened, he got his lip fattened. He turned out the next day and sparred again. And, you know, right at the beginning, I said, Daniel, you know, it doesn't have to be this tough. You know, we can make it easier. And he said, no. I want to understand what a fighter goes through. I want to, in some way, simulate what it has to be like.
I was never a boxer at school. I mean, I loved sports, but I was not a fighter, and I grew up in a district of London where people scrapped a lot. It was part of the daily routine. There's a lot of scrapping, and I wasn't a scrapper, but my friends were, and so I would get into scrapes sometimes, and was never that great at handling them. And I do remember a particular one where, for some reason, absolutely unknown to me, a kid in the class said, look, this was Friday, and he said, I'll see you 4 o'clock Monday in the playground. And I just had the whole weekend to think about that. And I was in a cold sweat about it. I don't know, I was probably only about 9 or 10 years old, but I knew that there was no way of avoiding this. I remember the fear of that. And that's the kind of fear that you're dealing with in the ring. And it's nothing to do with the pain. I remember the fight itself, and it was all over very quickly because he was fairly handy, this character. And I don't remember anything about physical pain at all, but there was something about the humiliation of having not overcome one's fear, having been made to be that fearful, and the anger that's engendered by that as well. And the fear that you kind of keep rediscovering that you have to control is almost like a childish fear. It's a childlike fear that doesn't relate in any way to the physical pain that you're going to suffer, because what you discover, and it's not that bad getting. I mean, it's not.
I think I'm more corrupt than
it's
you,
not
though.
fun. There's no one wants particularly, but I don't mind it.
Okay, can you continue?
In fact, I tend to respond quite well to getting hit every now and then.
I worked for a long time with Barry, maybe 1.5 years, 2 years, and for a time before that with 1 or 2 other trainers to try and learn some of the craft of boxing and to involve myself as close as I could with the sport of boxing and also with the life of the boxing world.
Keep your guard up, darling.
He got to the stage where he was like a really quality fighter.
Beginning, we did all the boxing stuff, and I did a lot of sitting in the third row, kind of going, you know, and peeking through doors, you know, kind of just putting my toe into the testosterone zone, and then going away again in a bit of a fright.
Liam, that was it. That's it. That was it. Listen to me.
I had to learn how to box for the film, and that was like different, so it was good fun training and all. It's a good laugh. We choreographed the fight, and Jim thought we looked too good, so we had to just make it up then as we went along. Because we had it all choreographed really well. It's really rough. I'd get my head killed.
Make him have a blood test. If it's clear and he stays off the junk, he can join.
Amateur boxing really does help in Ireland, help the working class people make a life for themselves, help the working class kids. It excels in hardened, sort of tough areas where there's a lot of unemployment and lack of hope. The boxing clubs are shining bright in these places and give these young kids an opportunity to make a life for themselves.
Fuck you right, Harry! Put your gun down, Donny Flynn! Fight me like a man! Didn't I hear you? I coached him. I trained him when he was a child. Destroyed his life.
I grew up with these guys and knew guys that were associated with clubs that had friends that died in the club, and guys that were, you know, obviously got caught up in the troubles and whatever.
This night is dedicated to the members of the Holy Family Boxing Club who've died. Now, all these boys' parents are in the hall tonight, so I'd like you all to observe a minute's silence.
This is the hardened area in Belfast, and you know, you've got guys that can brainwash you and fellas that get you involved in trouble, and obviously kids die from it, and so that's a fair reflection of what happens.
Half my fucking life I pissed away at all the good things in it because of that sickly bastard and his dirty little, cozy little fucking secret world and all the dirt in it.
There was a powerful and frightening piece, I remember, in the Irish Times while we were shooting. It was just before the marching season and during the marching season when, you know, when there was a big threat of violence erupting. And during the peace process that lasted quite a few months, it seemed as if people finally realised there was another possibility and wouldn't accept going back to anything else. But young kids, they're still frightened of the thing that lives on the other side of the barricade.
I do draw from growing up in Ireland. You know, you're surrounded by the situation. Since, you know, like Kent State University, you know, I suppose people of my age in America would remember, but like Bloody Sunday, there were 13 people killed, and that went on for like 10 years. Like there was conflicts where then the IRA responded, and then the British again, then the Protestants. So you're surrounded by it, you know, and you'd have to be influenced by it. But in a way, we wanted it to end. It's a kind of grown-up story about, like, can this end? And our attitude is like, we understand the historical reasons that the problem came about, but I think at the end of the 20th century, nearly the 21st century, this kind of violence is kind of like a brain-dead way to try and solve problems.
What was always deeply moving to me was that Barry had tremendous respect for the people that he was pitted against. Maybe it's only a gesture, and in his case we know it's genuine, in other people it might be less genuine, but when he knocked a guy down, and he did that often in his career, he'd be the first person to make sure that they were okay. I mean, he went through that devastating experience with young Ali when a fighter died as a result of a fight that he'd been in, and it's unimaginable what he went through psychologically.
One traumatic time in my life, in 1982, in the Grosvenor House Hotel in London, I had a tragic boxing match with a young guy called Young Ali, or Alimi Mustafa was his name, and he died, and it had a profound effect on me, and the story had an effect on Jim too, and he wanted to tell that story, only he changed the outcome of the fight. And that's a similar story to the third fight, and that is, I suppose, the only sort of similarity. The difference is the ending to Jim's fight is brilliant.
Box on!
It's over.
Box on!
The fight's over.
What you take on when you begin working on something is the responsibility of telling a story. And essentially you're telling a story that you really don't know what the outcome of that story is going to be. And that, during the course of that, the period of the filming, for both of us in different ways, that unleashes a huge degree of insecurity, which is probably quite useful to us both, because we have absolutely no idea where we're going some of the time.
It's maybe not as anarchic as it seems. It may be more that if everything was really structured, then I get the fear that it becomes bred, you know. It's like predictable in the wrong way.
We contributed very much to the way that we thought the story would go, you know. You suggest things and even write little bits yourself, and Daniel was the same. I mean, everybody was the same. It's not like, you know, Jim would stop in the middle of a scene and say, OK, we're going to have a workshop now. He's a real actor's director, which is fantastic. It really, you know, it's so alive, the process it's really exciting.
With all the fears that people privately carry within themselves, they sometimes are less than honest with each other in working situations. And I think that prevents the best work from being done. And I think Shay and I, whatever else happens, even if sometimes it's tough and sometimes it is tough, we speak our minds to each other.
I make it difficult for Daniel sometimes because I'm so spontaneous and kind of demanding that he's almost like a screenwriter, you know, in his approach. And I think that's hard for him. But, you know, it's almost like I think the only thing I say to Daniel is communicate rather than do art.
Today is our last day on Boxer, so what do we do to achieve what we need to achieve?
It's very hard for me to keep control. Well, 90% of directors are terrified. They play the game that they're in charge, and they make false, I think, my own experience, you make false moves, and you do false things and say, sure, it's okay, isn't it grand?
Here's my instinct. Can you give us a break for a second?
And I think it's just the elimination of that, that instinct that makes it great. Now, as you have 10 people to please and not just yourself, it becomes very difficult.
Right.
You know. So a lot of the time, when you're there, you have such an overwhelming personality, such a strong, forceful personality that I'm like, feel some like I'm surfboarding a lot of the time, do you know what I mean? That I'm up on a high wave and I could crash any time.
A film set is a chaotic place.
Okay, cut.
In order to be able to achieve enough of a peaceful climate within which you can unleash your own chaos, you have to have some kind of order. Because chaos and chaos together just make a mess.
Okay, right, go ahead, Dan. And kind of coming into the relationship with me and Daniel is like coming into a marriage, you know, it's like, but an intense marriage. If it lasted more than the shooting period, might end up with everybody going berserk, you know?
It's the face that's the most important thing, not the front. See, this is good, look. That's good. The pusher of is good. That's good, that's all good.
I think somewhere deep down that I think my job is to just make sure that nobody dies, do you know what I mean?
And the script's been kind of worked on, and I think, you know, it's moved away from the kind of political, dramatic, kind of violent side of the story, and it's moved more towards the love story.
I can give you up in my head, but my body's crying out for you. Don't.
The original first draft in this story I did had, he couldn't go with they couldn't get together because they were Catholic and Protestant, which is probably true, it's difficult, but it's such a cliche that you can't dramatise it.
It's so easy to focus on politics and religion when you're dealing with any story relating to Ireland, and particularly the north of Ireland. Then immediately your sort of vision you become kind of myopic almost. But in fact, life goes on and stories go on completely independent of that. In a way, that's what Maggie and Dana's story is.
I would have waited.
Don't be saying that. 14 years, Maggie.
I would have waited.
There's something almost kind of mundane about their friendship in any other circumstances, but it becomes absolutely extraordinary in this kind of cage that they're living in.
I think we get to London and we have a pretty hard time with him. I mean, he's been inside for planting a bomb in Belfast, and her dad is the head of the IRA in West Belfast, and so I think they're going to get a pretty tough time of the police in London, but maybe one day when peace breaks, they'll be back.
Where are you going?
We're going home.
There's always a possibility that you can regain your life no matter to what extent it's been ruined through your own actions or the actions of others, you can have it back.
All you had to do was walk across a prison corridor and shake hands with some of your old friends in the IRA. Snubbing people is not nice. But you never named names, and that's why you're a healthy man, understand?
However complex and compromised and politically impossible things seem, if somebody is straight and true, then that will triumph.
They see a situation that's been bad, but that there's a hope at the end of it, and that hope is gained by, normal things. These people live a life in the middle of the trouble. This is a love story, and it's funny that it's very difficult to write a love story in Ireland, and I actually don't know of any successful ones. And it's almost like it's impossible to be an adult enough in a society that doesn't have freedom or that isn't free, so that the characters aren't adult enough to have an adult relationship almost. And that's very hard. And in our love story, like, it's one of those love stories that's very tender, and it's not like the obvious kind of like they jump into bed, and it's very restrained, but yet it's not like restrained in the way that such a great film like Brief Encounter is restrained, which is very English. It's not by social norms that the restraint comes, it's by political norms, and that's the difference. And it's almost like replacing the social etiquette of England with the political etiquette of Ireland makes the love difficult.
I'm not a killer, Maggie. This place makes me want to kill.
I wish we could stay like this forever.
They push past the politics, and their love makes things difficult for the IRA, but when love makes things difficult for people, too bad. Because, if it's all is fair in love and war, the love comes first.